The White House briefing room was packed to the brim, buzzing with anticipation. Cameras rolled, journalists whispered among themselves, and the air was thick with tension. Karoline Leavitt, the formidable and articulate press secretary under President Donald Trump, took her place at the podium. She adjusted the microphone and looked up, her piercing blue eyes scanning the room. She exuded confidence, and when she spoke, her voice carried an authority that demanded attention. Good afternoon, everyone. Before we get to today's regular press briefing, I have something critical to share with the American people. A murmur spread across the room. It wasn't every day that a press conference began with such an ominous tone. The usual back and forth between the administration and the press was expected, but today felt different. Leavitt took a deep breath and continued, for years, Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has presented herself as a champion of the working class, a fighter for the underprivileged, and a fearless progressive. But the truth, ladies and gentlemen, is far from the image she projects. The journalists sat up straighter. They had come to expect verbal sparring between the Trump administration and its political adversaries, but this had the air of something far more serious. Leavitt clicked a remote and a large screen behind her flickered to life. I want to take you back to a series of financial transactions that have remained hidden from public scrutiny until now. The screen displayed a set of documents marked with timestamps, bank logos, and the unmistakable signature of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. These documents, Leavitt continued, show a disturbing pattern of financial dealings that completely contradict AOC's public statements about being a voice for the poor and against corporate greed. What you're about to see will change everything. The room fell silent as she gestured toward the first document, a transaction linking a shadowy political consultancy group to AOC's campaign fund. What you're looking at, Leavitt explained, is a wire transfer of over $2.3 million from an undisclosed donor to a shell organization operating under the guise of an environmental nonprofit. That organization funneled the money into the campaign fund of none other than Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. But here's the kicker, the donor in question is a billionaire hedge fund manager who has profited extensively from the very same Wall Street practices that AOC claims to despise. Gasps rippled through the room. The journalists, many of whom had previously defended Ocasio-Cortez, exchanged stunned glances. This isn't just hypocrisy, Leavitt pressed on. This is fraud. This is manipulation. And this is a direct betrayal of the very people she claims to fight for. She let the weight of her words settle before continuing. But it doesn't end there, she said. We've uncovered something even more shocking, financial irregularities that connect AOC's office to a series of real estate transactions involving foreign entities. The same congresswoman who has condemned corporate landlords and so-called gentrification has been quietly profiting from luxury real estate deals involving foreign investors, driving up property values in her own district and pushing out the very working-class citizens she claims to represent. The journalists erupted into a frenzy of questions, but Leavitt held up a hand. I will take all your questions shortly, she said. But first, let's get through the rest of what we have found. Because this goes much deeper than anyone could have imagined. She clicked the remote again, and another set of documents appeared on the screen. And this, she said, her voice unwavering, is where things get even more damning. The White House press room was now in a state of disbelief. Some reporters furiously typed notes while others whispered into their microphones, feeding real-time updates to their networks. But Karoline Leavitt was far from finished. She took a measured step forward, allowing the weight of her revelations to settle before dropping another bombshell. As I mentioned, she continued, we've discovered financial irregularities tied to luxury real estate transactions. But the question is, who are these foreign investors funding AOC's silent wealth-building empire? The screen behind her flickered again, revealing a spreadsheet packed with names, companies, and transaction logs. Several reporters leaned forward, squinting at the details. Then they saw it. The names on this list, Leavitt declared, belong to a network of Chinese and Middle Eastern financiers, many of whom have direct ties to the Chinese Communist Party and, more shockingly, state-owned enterprises that have been flagged by the U.S. intelligence community as potential threats to national security. The press room erupted. Voices overlapped as journalists struggled to process the implications. AOC, one of the most vocal critics of foreign interference in American politics, had apparently been receiving financial backing from entities connected to adversarial governments. Leavitt raised her hand, commanding silence once more. I'm sure the congresswoman will claim she had no knowledge of this, she said, her tone sharp. That she had no control over who invests in the properties she has a financial interest in. But that excuse won't hold up because we also found direct communication between her office and representatives of these foreign entities. Another click of the remote. Now on the screen, emails appeared. These emails, Leavitt pointed, show correspondence between senior staffers in AOC's office and executives from Beijing-based investment firms. They discuss favorable zoning changes, potential tax breaks, and ways to ease regulatory burdens for these foreign-backed development projects in New York. In other words, she wasn't just benefiting from these deals, her office was actively helping facilitate them. A stunned hush fell over the room. The Congresswoman has built her career attacking the wealthy, denouncing corporate greed, and claiming to fight against special interests, Leavitt continued. But behind the scenes, she's been making backroom deals with some of the most powerful elites in the world. The hypocrisy is staggering. She took a pause, allowing the weight of the revelation to fully sink in before delivering another crucial detail. But here's where things take a turn from just political hypocrisy to potential criminal activity. The room tensed up. Leavitt clicked the remote once more and the screen displayed another document, this time from the Federal Election Commission, FEC. This is an official complaint filed with the FEC alleging campaign finance violations by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez re-election committee. She stepped aside, allowing the journalists to see the document in full. The allegation, she continued, suggests that AOC's campaign funds were improperly used for personal expenses, including luxury vacations, high-end fashion purchases, and even private jet flights, all while publicly condemning so-called millionaire politicians and advocating for climate justice. The room burst into a cacophony of camera flashes, murmurs, and hurried note-taking. The American people deserve answers, Leavitt declared. And Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez needs to be held accountable. She folded her arms and let the final slide stay on the screen for a moment longer before turning back to the room. I will now take your questions. Reporters shot up from their seats, hands waving frantically, desperate to be called on. The White House press room was now in complete chaos. Dozens of hands shot into the air, voices overlapping as journalists from across the political spectrum vied for Leavitt's attention. The tension was electric. This wasn't just a typical press briefing anymore. It was a political earthquake. Leavitt, maintaining her composure, pointed at a senior reporter from the Washington Post. Karoline, are you saying that Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez personally profited from these real estate dealings, or was this just a case of her office making questionable decisions? Leavitt didn't hesitate. I'm saying that AOC personally profited. These are not just questionable decisions, this is deliberate deception. The financial records show direct payouts disguised as consulting fees to an LLC registered under her former campaign manager's name. That LLC then routed funds to accounts linked to AOC's personal and family expenses. Gasps rippled through the crowd. This was no longer just about political hypocrisy, this was looking like full-blown corruption. She pointed to another journalist, this time from CNN. Press Secretary Leavitt, are you suggesting that the Congresswoman could face legal action? Leavitt nodded. Based on the evidence we've presented, I believe there is enough to warrant a full investigation by the Department of Justice and the FEC. I can confirm that senior officials are already reviewing these materials and there is a strong case for campaign finance fraud, wire fraud, and potential violations of the Foreign Agents Registration Act. The room exploded again. This was bigger than anyone had expected. Another journalist from the New York Times managed to get in a question. Is President Trump aware of these findings? What is the White House's position on this? Leavitt gave a knowing smile. President Trump believes in accountability. If these allegations prove true, he expects Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez to face the same scrutiny and consequences that any other American would. No one is above the law, not even the so-called progressive champions who claim to fight for the people while lining their own pockets. More flashes. More murmurs. The story was spiraling fast, and the media knew this was going to dominate headlines for weeks. A reporter from Fox News stood up next. Has Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez responded to these revelations? Leavitt's smirk deepened. As of this moment, silence. Not a single word from AOC or her office. But I have no doubt that she will try to spin this into some kind of right-wing attack instead of addressing the facts. That's what career politicians do when they get caught. She let that statement linger for a moment before continuing. But let me be clear, these are her own documents. Her own transactions. Her own emails. The truth doesn't care about political narratives. The room was now filled with a nervous, almost giddy energy. Journalists knew this was a career-defining moment, and they wanted every possible detail before the press conference ended. Another question came from a Politico reporter. What about the Democratic Party? Are they standing by AOC or will they distance themselves? Leavitt folded her arms. That's the question, isn't it? Will the Democratic leadership who claim to be against corruption hold AOC accountable? Or will they protect her because she's a convenient political tool? She paused for dramatic effect. My sources tell me that some senior Democrats are already discussing ways to minimize the damage, which means throwing her under the bus if necessary. We might see a major shift in the party's stance on AOC in the coming days. The murmurs in the press room turned into hushed speculation. Was this the beginning of the end for AOC? Leavitt took a deep breath, then delivered the final blow of the briefing. Ladies and gentlemen, the American people deserve honesty. They deserve leaders who practice what they preach. And what we've shown here today is that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has built a political empire on deception. With that, she stepped away from the podium, leaving the room in stunned silence. The moment Karoline Leavitt stepped away from the podium, the political world went into overdrive. Within minutes, the press conference was being rebroadcast across every major news network. Social media exploded with hashtags like hashtag AOC exposed, hashtag Karoline versus AOC, and hashtag political fraud. Meanwhile, inside the offices of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez team, panic set in. Staffers scrambled to draft a response, but nothing seemed adequate. The evidence was too damning. In a private meeting at the Democratic National Committee, DNC headquarters, senior leaders huddled together in a tense discussion. This is bad, one strategist muttered, running a hand through his graying hair. We can't defend this. We need to distance the party from her before this spreads further. But she's one of our loudest voices, another official protested. If we abandon her now, it'll look like we're admitting guilt. She's toxic now, a third person interjected firmly. We can't afford to go down with her. That night, CNN, MSNBC, and even traditionally left-leaning media outlets began shifting their tone. Where once AOC had been a progressive icon, now she was a liability. Phrases like serious allegations, potential criminal investigation, and questions AOC must answer dominated the headlines. AOC's desperate response. At 10 p.m., AOC finally emerged on a live Instagram stream, her usual weapon of choice for direct communication with her supporters. But this time, she didn't look confident. Her usual fiery, self-assured demeanor had been replaced by a nervous, shaky energy. She took a deep breath and tried to smile. Hey, everyone, she began, her voice wavering slightly. I just want to address the lies and smears coming from the Trump administration today. She fumbled with her phone for a second before continuing. This is nothing but a political witch hunt. They see a strong progressive woman standing up for working-class people and they're trying to destroy me. Her usual audience of diehard supporters flooded the comments with messages of support, but others weren't buying it. What about the documents, though? One person typed. Why are you dodging the facts? Another asked. AOC swallowed hard and pushed forward. They want to distract you from the real issues. Climate change, income inequality, these are the things we should be talking about, not some made-up scandal cooked up by Trump's people. But even left-wing journalists weren't convinced. Within minutes, MSNBC's Rachel Maddow commented on air, this response doesn't address the financial records or the foreign deals. People are going to need more than just, this is a smear campaign. The damage had been done. The DOJ steps in. By the next morning, the scandal had reached the highest levels of government. Attorney General Josh Hawley held an emergency press conference. The Department of Justice has officially launched a preliminary investigation into allegations of financial misconduct, foreign influence, and campaign finance violations regarding Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, he announced. The moment those words left his lips, it was over. Political analysts knew that even if she wasn't convicted of a crime, AOC's career was effectively dead. No party could afford to back someone under federal investigation, especially not with a presidential election looming. Even President Trump weighed in on Truth Social, posting, AOC caught red-handed. The biggest fraud in Congress is finally being exposed. The people deserve justice. Hashtag AOC exposed. The betrayal. That afternoon, the final betrayal came. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries took the podium and delivered the final blow. As leaders in the Democratic Party, we believe in transparency and accountability. Given the seriousness of these allegations, we are calling on Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez to fully cooperate with investigators and consider stepping aside while the process unfolds. In other words, she was being thrown under the bus. AOC, once the rising star of the progressive movement, was now alone.